Hi, I'm Reggie York. This is a presentation on explaining the problem in organizational decision making. How do you explain the problem that you have identified? So you've already identified the problem, but now you want to explain it. So we might ask the question, why should we explain the problem? Uh, One reason is understanding of the problem leads to potential solutions. If the lack of knowledge leads one not to be a good parent, then maybe lack of knowledge is a cause of poor parenting. Therefore, perhaps training would be a logical solution. One way to understand the problem is to examine its causes, just like we just mentioned. Another way to explain the problem is with the help of theories related to work behavior. So we're going to talk about both of those as we examine the question of how to explain the problem. So first, let's talk about analyzing causes. Was it staff turnover or a growing tendency of staff to ignore certain policies or an increase in workload or what? If you have a certain kind of problem condition that has arisen that staff, for example, are not um following certain kinds of policies, implementing them properly. Maybe it's because there's staff turnover and the new staff don't understand the policies, and so forth. So these are just some of the kinds of things you might be looking at as a possible cause of the problem. As you can see from this, each of these provides you with some tips for what kind of solutions might work best. Let's look at analyzing the causes of client no-shows, that is, clients who fail to show up for appointments. Why was there an increase in client no-shows? Um, have we changed the type of clients we serve? If so, does this new type of client have a need we are not addressing? Have we changed the staff we employ? That may be related to why clients are not showing up for appointments. Have our services changed? Maybe they are less effective, less accessible, or something of that nature, and maybe that has been a potential cause of the increase in client no-show rates. Let's talk about three conditions for determining causation. One is an empirical relationship between the cause and the effect. That is to say, a relationship that can be determined or examined by data. The second is ruling out alternative causes. If you're thinking about one potential cause, then you might look at what are some other possible causes of this problem and see if you can rule those out so as to improve the likelihood that the cause you've identified initially is the best cause, the most important cause of the problem. A third is establishing if there tends to be a change in the effect after a change in the cause, rather than vice versa. This would be a logical thing. If certain things change and then something else changes, then the thing that changed first is more likely to be a cause of the thing that changed second than vice versa. Let's look at these things individually. Empirical relationship. Uh, Example one, have we found that older staff have problems with the new information system, but younger staff do not? Uh, and that's when we're talking about potentially a problem with implementing the new information system. So let's go back to the beginning. The problem is the data we have is that the new information system has not been implemented properly. Have we found that older staff um, have problems that younger staff do not? Number example, have we found that staff who have failed to be diligent in sending out phone reminders to clients are more likely to have more client no-shows? Uh, Ruling out alternative causes. Um, in the previous one, by the way, we were talking about situations where we could see a relationship between the cause and the effect. You must rule out other potential causes of the problem. Um, did something change other than supervisor in the period when staff satisfaction went from good to bad? Maybe office hours changed, or client caseloads went up, or the agency stopped giving comp time for persons who stayed late. These are other kinds of things. So these are different kinds of alternative causes, and you would look at each one to see which one had made the most sense in regard to the information that you have. Time order is another one. Did we find that a change in the cause was preceded by a change in the effect? Example, staff were satisfied with the old supervisor but are not happy with the new one. Thus, a change in supervisor preceded in time a change in staff satisfaction. Staff used to be satisfied, they got a new supervisor, now they're not satisfied. Of course, that would be something that would seem to be logical and easy. Hit the pause button, look at this, and answer the question, which one of these conditions for causation do we have here? Is it empirical relationship, time order, or alternative causes? So we see that people who are comfortable with the computer are more likely to get the reports in on time. The problem we're addressing is getting reports in on time. Well, you see a relationship between comfort with a computer and getting your reports in on time. So I would say that's an example of empirical relationship. Now let's continuing with the example of comfort with the computer as one cause. Look at this, hit the pause button, read it, and then come back. Well, if you were not previously looking at the comfort with the computer as a cause, you would probably say this is an empirical relationship situation because you see uh, that a different type of the type of job you have may be related to getting your reports on time. But if you look at it in regard to the question, is comfort with the computer the cause, and then you look at this, then you could say that this is an examination of an alternative cause. And then you look at more information to see which of these two is more important as a cause. Okay, let's look at the idea of using a theory to explain the problem. First of all, what is a theory? A theory is an attempt to explain. Some theories draw our attention to roles, while others focus upon the perceived consequences of our behaviors, and others look upon our expectations about the relationship of behavior and outcomes. So there are different kinds of theories that explain behavior in the organization. Each one focuses on something a little different in trying to explain. According to reinforcement theory, for example, behavior is caused by perceived consequences of those behaviors. If you believe that failing to get your reports in on time will get you fired, then you realize that getting fired is a potential consequence of not getting your reports in on time. Therefore, you will get your reports in on time, assuming that you do not want to be fired. Let's look at role theory as one possibility. Role theory explains behavior by reference to confusion or conflict in regard to the roles people play when they work together. We have expectations about a person based on the role they have in the organization. How can role theory help? Problems can arise when we have roles that conflict with the roles of others. For example, you could look at this: the finance manager may refuse to approve a certain expenditure because it fails to comply with policies, but we want that expenditure because we want it to do our jobs best. We need that expenditure, but the finance officer says it fails to comply. Therefore, uh, I don't approve it. So these roles of finance manager and social worker may conflict. Sometimes we have two roles that conflict, such as friend and evaluating supervisor. If you're a supervisor in a human service organization, you've got to be careful about being too much a good buddy, good friend of those you supervise, because those two roles sort of conflict. Friend is supposed to be supportive and so forth. and not to evaluate you, but the supervisor is supposed to evaluate you as part of that person's job. Sometimes the role expectations of different actors conflict. Here's a quote: I was supposed to be consulted on that before the action was taken. So my expectations based on my role were inconsistent with what happened with regard to someone's behavior. Looking at reinforcement theory, behavior is caused by perceived consequences of our behavior, which we just mentioned a few moments ago. How can reinforcement theory help us? We could examine rewards and punishments in our work structure to see if they are rational with regard to our intended outcomes and avoidance of problems. Do we fail to reward those who should be rewarded? Do we engage in punishments that we should not be engaged in? Or do we fail to offer punishments that we should engage in order to achieve the behaviors that we want to achieve? We can think of solutions that might entail rewards or punishments or negative reinforcement, the latter being the removal of a reward. So we can do things manipulating rewards and punishments in such a way as to improve the likelihood that a certain behavior will be exhibited by staff. Expectancy theory, I'm just going to have you hit the pause button and read that, and then come back to me. So here we have a situation that looks at behavior in regard to the perception that a behavior will lead to an outcome, the extent to which you value that outcome, and the extent to which you perceive you can perform the behavior at the level that will gain the valued outcome. So this provides you with a framework for thinking about why a particular problem exists. So if we think about how can expectancy theory help, you can analyze a work motivation situation to see if there are any obstacles to good work motivation. For example, do workers perceive the behavior will lead to a given outcome? To what extent do they value it and have confidence they can do it? So you can look at any particular situation in regard to those questions. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I hope this was helpful to you.